It was first reported by the New York Daily News that the New York Knicks had interest in general manager Elton Brand, assuming that Brand would be fired from the Sixers at the conclusion of the season. Now, my general rule of thumb when it comes to NBA rumors is that if it's not reported by Woj or Shams, then it's total bullshit. But I mean, with Tony and Khabib probably canceled, my dreams of becoming a hardcore South Korean basketball fan completely dashed, and a WrestleMania being held this weekend without any fans, what exactly is there to talk about? So let's look into and grade every decision Elton Brand has ever made as a general manager for the Sixers. Elton Brand was a surprise hire as general manager for the Sixers on September 18th, 2018. Of course, after the Brian Colangelo Twitter burner scandal and the Sixers falling 4-1 to the Celtics that previous season in the second round, Joel Embiid was already an all-star, Ben Simmons was well on his way, and Markelle Fultz was there. Fultz was there. And the Sixers definitely had title aspirations headed into the year. So the first big move for Elton Brand and the Sixers came when Jonah Bolden was recalled from the G League by the Sixers on November 9th, 2018. Let me check my notes. The first actual big move came when Jimmy Butler, Justin Patton, and a second-round pick was traded from the Minnesota Timberwolves to the 76ers in exchange for Dario Saric, Jared Bayless, and of course, Robert Covington. Jimmy Butler was far and away the biggest piece in this trade, with Robert Covington, a very solid 3-and-D player, being the second biggest, and Dario Saric, who is a decent role player but was really struggling for the Sixers to that point in the season, being the third biggest piece. I mean, Saric has a great personality, but he's a defensive liability. The reality of the situation is that Brand made the gutsy decision to move two role players for a star, and with the Sixers falling to Toronto in Game 7, it obviously didn't work out in the playoffs, but it was the right move to make at the time, and it did make sense to the Sixers. It did make them better. No team with Dario Saric in the starting lineup is going to contend for a title. That's just a fact. No offense. More on Jimmy Butler later, but at the time, the Sixers needed a bucket getter, and they got a bucket getter. This trade gets an A for effort, but B to a B plus in terms of execution. Now we get to the trade deadline of that year, Elton Brand's first as a general manager. The first big blow came in the wee hours of the night on February 6, 2019, and it was a doozy. The Clippers would be trading Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, and Mike Scott to the Sixers in exchange for Mike Muscala, Wilson Chandler, Landry Shamet, a 2020 first-round pick, a 2021 first-round pick, a 2021 second-round pick, and a 2023 second-round pick. That is a lot to unpack, so I'll go player by player. Muscala blows, Wilson Chandler is expendable, and Shamet is on the rise and definitely could be one of the best three-point sharpshooters in the league. Mike Scott in the last year of his contract played well to close the 2019 season. Boban is pound for pound the cutest player in the NBA, but his perimeter defense is horrendous, and he was unplayable in the playoffs, which basically means the trade comes down to Tobias for Landry Shamet and the picks. And at the time, it made sense as Tobias was balling out in Los Angeles, and he did play well for the Sixers as they went into the postseason, but he ultimately crumbled against the Raptors in the Game 7 series, and the Sixers lost. But in line with the Butler trade, these are the moves you need to make as a general manager. If you can have Tobias Harris and have him be the fourth best player on the team, you make that move every single time. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for the Sixers that season. We'll get to more on Tobias and Mike Scott later, but I give that trade an A for effort, but overall a B- in terms of execution. Then we get to the conclusion of the Markelle Fultz era in Philly. Markelle Fultz was traded to the Magic on February 7, 2019 for Jonathan Simmons, a 2020 first-round pick that was protected, and a 2019 second-rounder. Folks, this move had to be made by Elton because Fultz wasn't working out in Philly. He wasn't even playing at the time with no timetable to return, and his first overall contract was expensive as hell, which no real contender can have on the books and expect to win a title. That, to go along with his plummeting trade value, meant the Sixers had to get whatever they could out of him as soon as possible. And what they did get wasn't much. It really wasn't. Jonathan Simmons was walking garbage on the Sixers during his time there. A second-round pick is what they got, and a 2020 top 20 protected first-round pick from the Thunder. That pick looked doomed coming into this year, but nobody, and I mean nobody, could have predicted the rise of the Thunder and Chris Paul and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And now, if the season were to end today, which it actually might due to the coronavirus, the Sixers would get that pick. That pick would convey, which would be huge for the Sixers. Now, that pick is interesting because it does have some mileage on it. They initially got the Thunder pick in a trade with the Thunder in 2016 then gave it away at the 2017 draft, and now got it back at the Fultz trade February 2019. So that Thunder pick has definitely seen some shit. Also, for a recap of the train wreck that was Markelle Fultz's time in Philly, I made 2 videos on it leading up to today pretty much, so link in the description, definitely check that out. Obviously, Fultz is playing a little better in Orlando, but it wouldn't have been worth keeping him around, and he would not be a good fit on the Sixers offense right now at all. I give that trade right now about a C- with potential to improve based on the OKC pick. Again, it was overall a shitty situation to begin with. Brian Colangelo, who traded for Fultz, he was the Sixers general manager at the time. Think of this as a group project where Brian Colangelo was assigned to write the essay, and Elton Brand had to revise it. Colangelo turned in a shit sandwich of an essay, which then Brand had to revise, make the best of what he had, and turn in for a grade. So right now, I give this pick a C-. Finally, before the season ended, Greg Monroe was signed to fill the void to be the backup to Joel Embiid. Turned out to be a disaster, and one of the reasons why the Sixers lost to the Raptors because there was no valid backup to Joel Embiid. Check the box score from the Raptors Game 7, this pick gets a D-. Alright, and just like that with Kawhi Leonard's game winner, the 2018-2019 season ended in heartbreak for the Sixers with calls to run it back with the squad they had. And all eyes turned to Elton Brand to see if he could keep making the ballsy decisions that he had been making. Now, fast forward to the 2019 NBA draft. The Sixers drafted Ty Jerome with pick 24 and Carson Edwards with pick 33, who was then traded for Matisse Thybulle, who they reportedly wanted all along. Now, the Sixers may have telegraphed that they wanted Thybulle a little bit prematurely, but they ultimately got the guy they wanted, and Thybulle has contributed immediately for the Sixers, with guys like Carson Edwards and Ty Jerome struggling as of late. Thybulle could one day become an elite defender, and he's playing well, although he has struggled since coming back from injury. But right now, I'd give these picks and the trade an A-. June 30th, 2019 saw a lot of movement as free agency had started, especially with the Sixers. JJ Redick, the only elite three-point shooter the Sixers had, would be signing with the Pelicans for a 2-year, $26.5 million deal. A price the Sixers decided wasn't worth it, and ultimately I think they made the right move. That is just too steep. Then the Sixers went big. Big as in a lot of money, and big as in tall. They re-signed Tobias Harris to a 5-year, $180 million contract. Surprisingly got former Celtics center Al Horford on a 4-year, $109 million deal, and re-signed Mike Scott to a 2-year, $9.8 million contract. How have these signings played out for the Sixers? Well, Tobias has played overall pretty well, I would say, for the Sixers. He's averaging about 20 and 7 right now, but he's definitely not consistent enough to make me think he's worth every single penny of his contract. He has been inefficient from deep on the Sixers, which for this team is not good. Then, the current disaster that is Al Horford's contract. Even in hindsight, the signing made little sense. Signing Al Horford when you already have an elite big man in Joel Embiid. Horford had some good gains this year for the Sixers, but mostly he is inefficient scoring compared to his previous history, and he's clogged up the lane. He has worked a little better coming off the bench, but since when do bench players make $109 million over the course of 4 years? They usually don't. This contract haunts Brand and the Sixers and will continue to haunt them until Horford is either eased into the lineup or is moved. It's one or the other. To put 2 big men on a team when the league has gotten smaller and smaller now just looks kind of silly. And not just on a team, but initially in the starting lineup with 2 fat-ass contracts. Then the Mike Scott re-signing for 2 years, $9.8 million, which made sense at the time as Scott closed the season strong and looked to be a good player off the bench. But he has just been bad this year, there's no other way around it. He's gotten a little bit better as of late, but overall he has still just been very bad. Alright, so for grades, the Tobias signing gets a C+, Al Horford signing gets a D-, and the Mike Scott signing gets a D. Brand also made some minor signings, getting guys like Howell Neto, Trey Burke, James Ennis, and Kyle O'Quinn. But these signings hardly move the needle, and Ennis and Burke aren't on the team anymore, so it's not even worth giving out a grade. Then we get to the Furkan Korkmaz signing, which was surprising for a lot of fans because they were all convinced he was going to be playing overseas like he said he would be. Thankfully, he didn't. Brand signed him to the offseason. He's been playing pretty well for the Sixers, and he's got some definite holes in his game, but his contract is cheap as hell, so he's worth every penny. That signing gets an A-. We look at another huge move Elton Brand made, which was a 4-team deal, but really was only between the Sixers and the Heat in terms of the Sixers. Jimmy Butler would essentially be traded for Josh Richardson. Now, depending on who you talk to and what you believe is generally how you view this trade. If you believe that Jimmy Butler truly wanted out of Philadelphia and was not going to play there under any circumstances, then getting Josh Richardson out of a trade is a big win. If you believe that Jimmy wanted the max contract and Elton and friends didn't want to give it to him, then you can't help but scratch your head and wonder why, as the Sixers desperately needed a bucket-getter and still do, why they didn't just re-sign Jimmy. Now, don't get me wrong, Josh Richardson is a good player, but Jimmy is much, much better. And Jimmy would definitely give you much more bang for your buck on the Sixers than a guy like, let's say, Al Horford. So, all things considered, I give that trade a C. The Sixers also signed guard Shake Milton to a 3-year, $5 million contract, which gets an A++ because he's been balling out lately. I mean, he is a bucket getter. The jury is still out on how good he can be, but he is worth every penny. Now, of course, when it comes to Brand's final grade, moves like this will be weighted less, and moves like Tobias signing and Horford signing will be weighted more because they have more of an impact on the team as a whole. Ben Simmons agreed to a 5-year max extension with the Sixers over the summer, which I think gets an A. He's worth every penny. He's emerged into an elite star, and it is well deserved for the young lad. Now, from the summer, fast forward to February 6th with the Sixers fighting for the 6th seed. Holy shit, the Sixers are fighting for the 6th seed? Sadly, yes, and the Sixers trade 3 picks to the Golden State Warriors in exchange for Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson. They made this trade as they desperately needed 3-point shooting, which they barely, Korkmaz and Shake, that's it. The Sixers needed to make this move if they wanted to be at all competitive going into the postseason, but Burks and Robinson have been streaky at best, so I'd give this overall trade a B-. Which brings us to today. The Sixers are currently the biggest disappointment in the NBA outside of Rudy Gobert. Ben Simmons is obviously hurt right now, but the general fit for the Sixers before, involving Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Josh Richardson, Ben Simmons, and Horford, didn't work as there is no spacing and certainly no shooting. Elton Brand's sweet ass is on the hot seat right now, as well as Coach Brett Brown. Then the league kind of shut down due to the coronavirus with no return date. Overall, right now, I'd give Elton Brand a C as a general manager. Not the best, but certainly not the worst in the league. At times he made ballsy decisions that paid off, and at times he made ballsy decisions that bit him right in the ass. Before the pandemic hit, most thought Elton Brand would be out as Sixers general manager if they failed to do well in the playoffs, but this virus has really changed everything. If the season was to be canceled without playoffs, who knows if Elton Brand would keep his job or not. That obviously remains to be seen, and I certainly don't feel strongly in terms of a prediction in one way or the other. Now, as far as the Knicks general manager rumors, all I have to say to that is, who the fuck wants to be the general manager of the Knicks? That is without a doubt the hardest job on the planet, a thankless job, and if you fail, which is more than likely, the New York subway street rats are thought of in higher regard than you. And it's certainly not like Knicks owner James Dolan has your best interests. To put the difficulty of the Knicks general manager position in context, I kind of like to put it like this. Let's say a guy points a gun at you and says you have to pick one of these 2 jobs between the Knicks general manager and the President of the United States. Whatever job you do, I'm going to follow you, and in 4 years I'm going to come back, and if you're not successful at that job, I'm going to kill you. Which job do you think you'll pick? Because I am certainly picking the President of the United States. I think any random bum off the street has a better shot at being a good president rather than a good New York Knicks general manager. Now that being said, when this thing turns around in New York, assuming it actually ever does, the general manager, and rightfully so, will be treated like a god. Now will it be Elton Brand? Only time will tell. Alright, that is it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe. I'm going to try and make a video once a week, maybe twice a week because I'm so goddamn bored. Check out the website, votetheprocess.com. A lot of great sports content on there, not just basketball, football as well. And check out the description for the background music in this video, as well as great outro music by young up-and-coming artist Paradise. And that is it for the video. Paradise, play us off, motherfucker.
What we gonna do? Every day. I'm with you. Cannot find no one greater than my baby. What a time, always smoking on that haze.